If you're curious about contemporary art, how it gets produced, and by whom, you're listening to the right podcast. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the first of many Art Dimensions Beyond the Palette podcasts. I'm Whitney Rosenson, and I'm the owner of Art Dimensions, a fine contemporary art leasing and sales business. I'm also a lover of contemporary art, and I grew up around it as my parents were avid collectors. I have a BA in history of art, and I've been running my company for 20 years. Every week, I'll be chatting with a different artist on my roster and diving deep into their creative process. And I may just pepper in a few other folks in the art world, like set decorators, art collectors, and gallerists. If you're curious about contemporary art, how it gets produced, and by whom, you're listening to the right podcast. I'm so excited today because I have my first guest on, and I will be chatting with an outstanding photographer and human, Howie Ronay. Hi, Howie.
Hi, Whitney. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to talk to you today.
Oh my God, my pleasure. Welcome to Beyond the Palette, and thanks for making the time.
Absolutely.
I'm just going to dive right in. You seem to be like the busiest guy in the world right now. I know you work full-time for Fuqua Films, and you win awards in advertising, and you create campaigns for companies like Kraft and Motorola, but you're also shooting with your camera. So how do you have time for it all?
We don't have kids. That's an attempt at humor, but the truth is I do feel really, really grateful to have been keeping busy during this time. I've always been somebody that tried to keep my hands in a lot of different creative pots, if you will. I do my photography, which is, finding the beauty in these objects on the street, the dumpsters, the overlooked trash cans and such. And that keeps me fulfilled on a very base creative level. And then there is remote work as a creative director. My background is executive creative director in advertising. Now, what technology allows us to do even before the pandemic is an agency can call me from New York and say, "Are you available? We're selling X product from X company. We're briefing teams on Tuesday. You in?" And I get the brief on a Zoom call like we're doing now, and I go off and develop ideas for TV, social, print, the whole gamut. You present to the agency, you revise the work, and then you present to the client. And if you're lucky enough, it goes into production. So the remote work for advertising agencies is another bucket I'm keeping very active in right now. I'm working with a New York shop a lot. And then Fuqua Films is a very interesting thing that actually ties into photography, not in the way we might think. It's not about my work per se, but Antoine Fuqua is a feature film director. And the reason I met him is because sometimes feature directors, those are big commitments for them, time commitments. A film is 2, 3, 4 years in the making. Whereas a commercial, some of them are open to commercial. They love the quick format. That's a week of their work. They're like a fly in, fly out kind of thing. They make some good money and they're done. We had hit it off about 8 years ago, and he called me and said, "I'd like you to try to do something. Can you take one of my scripts and put photos to the pages?" That helps spark ideas for the shots, for the tone, for the color palette. These became beautiful, and I do this today. I just finished one. They become beautiful, elaborate photography books. The left-hand page, if you imagine, is the dialogue from the script, the copy. The right hand are beautiful, artful photographs that I find from film, from beautiful websites, from artist websites. Like, I just kind of find stock.
Okay, so those are not your...
No, and they're not used to sell anything. They're just used to convey an idea.
Right.
So they're used to inspire. Now, in the I don't want to take too much time, but in the old days, a director would sit and tear magazine pages out, and they call them tear sheets. And he would say, "I want to light it like a Rembrandt. That's how the opening's going to look." Now, with InDesign and Photoshop and the Adobe Suite, it becomes this like 400-page beautiful book that's really detailed.
Oh, that sounds super cool.
Yeah.
Now, I mean, you've been shooting for about 10 years, is that right?
Maybe not quite that long, but approaching it.
You're approaching 10 years as a photographer. How does your advertising influence your photography? Or how does it did it directly influence the subject matter? Because I know you shoot old signage, you shoot old trucks and cars and newspaper stands and railings, and you create abstract photography from those.
You had sent me the questions, to full disclosure, before we spoke, or before we're speaking today. And this question was really interesting and made me think deeply because I was like, I didn't know how to answer it first, to be honest. But then it struck me that I've spent my whole career in advertising trying to shift the way people look at something. What happens with a brand a lot of times is they get dusty. Literally, they get forgotten about. They're no longer in the consumer's mind. It happens to all of us. We're all consumers. We forget about brands like Kmart. It's not top of mind. So, what's really interesting about your question is that's what I've kind of done with this work. Nobody looks at a dumpster. Nobody stops to look at a trash can. My job, I guess, was to try to shift our perspective and our perception of what these things are and what they can be. So it's not so much, I think, like, is the trash can dumpster thing, was that kind of sparked by advertising? I think the whole mission has been to change and shift perspective.
Very so interesting. Your motto is sort of finding beauty in all things. So what does that mean to you?
So a little TMI, and we're not going to go too deep on it, but when I was in school, I was diagnosed with Hodgkin's disease, and that's a form of cancer that affects a lot of younger people. And that was an ordeal, and it's easy to talk about today, but at the time, it was a long treatment. I think you come out of that and it's a bumper sticker. It's cliche to say, well, now I appreciate every moment of life. And then we've heard people say that, and I don't want to come across like everything's Pollyanna now and everything's always glass half full. I have the same experiences every human does, but it does change you. There's no way you come out of that experience not having shifted anything. So I think I would say that it's not so much I live life with rose colored glasses, but I think I'm very sensitive to the world around me, and the perspective has been optimized. Like I definitely do try to see when things are dark, there is a silver lining. That is true. I think I never knew that that might be a nugget that sparked something, but I think that did.
Just so you're so grateful and you sound so grateful and you sound so evolved from what you went through as a kid. So I love that. And did you ever consider painting or sculpting, or was it just go right to the camera?
Funny question because I'd probably tell you that I'm a terrible painter, a terrible sculptor. I tried it in college, so part of my schooling was not only advertising and graphic design, but it was called applied photography. It was how to apply the camera in a very graphic way. Like, how do you line up a shot? It was very advertising focused. How do you take a box of cereal and make it interesting? Although I walked out of that schooling at I went to the University of Delaware, not so much thinking about that overtly. I think that seeped into this work because my job now with my photography is how do I look at that dumpster differently? How am I finding the composition in that dumpster? How am I finding lines that I think are beautiful and that can become an abstract piece of modern art?
I just want everyone to try to visualize this. How do you get the colors so vivid, and what sort of process do you go through? You take the photo of, let's say, an old truck hood, the hood of an old truck, and then what do you do?
My photographs are taken on my iPhone. And that used to make me feel like I can't tell people that. But the truth is, feature films are being shot on the iPhone.
Sure.
Commercials are going to be shot on the iPhone, and they started to be already. So that's my tool. And what's great about that is that when I'm walking along the sidewalk or I'm on my bike or whatever, these things will pop out and speak to me. Like I'll be riding along where most people might not notice the dumpster on the right. I'm like, oh my God, what a beauty. So it's like impromptu. It's like a photo session, a photo shoot that happens on the street where I take loads of shots and I'm getting in there. But I always joke that the dumpster does a lot of the work. The trash can does a lot of the work. When I find that everything I do, and I think we've spoken about this, ends up in a triptych. Every subject on the website, if you go to Art by Renee, is you'll see the three shots that are the final photos of one subject. So I'll shoot many, many shots, and that's what digital photography allows you to do. And I'll be discerning about which I pick. But once I find those three that I love that speak to me, I do some work in post, but I don't want to come across like I'm manipulating the subject. I'm not. I'm swinging contrast. I might be bumping up color that was already there. Again, that's even the post of this is part of the message. The beauty was there. I'm not really changing that much. I'm going to bring out what was there a little bit more.
Yeah, and you're shifting people's perspective on those objects that we walk by every day and don't even notice, which is so amazing. Now, I have to ask this question because it's so pertinent to the times, but now that we're dealing with COVID, do you think it's affected your process at all?
Luckily, it hasn't affected my process because my process has always been pretty one of isolation. I mean, I'm walking along the street. and no one's lined up at that dumpster where I'm like, can I get in there? Like my subjects are not sought after, and it's me and that thing. So I've been lucky in that I'm not relying on group shots of human beings. Like I'm not, there's no big crew. Like, so the process has remained the same.
And there are no people in your shots
No.
because it's all abstract.
And even if I shoot landscape, if I'm on vacation, I never have people in my shot. I love landscapes. I love structures. I love
Really?
inanimate objects.
So landscapes, like you'll take a panoramic shot of mountains or
Those are that just came out of me just now. I'm just saying when I go on vacation with my wife, I'm always shooting the mountains, the way where am I putting the horizon line? Am I putting it at the bottom third? Am I splitting it evenly? I'm thinking about that as a graphic composition, but those are I wouldn't say those are for public consumption. I'd have to go back and take a look.
I mean, to me, your images. What about the fact that they can heal people during this time of COVID? They're so vibrant and they're so, for people who are listening, you can check out Howie's photos at artdimensionsonline.com. And I'll also post some on my website on the new podcast page. But they're so vibrant. And I really think that that can help heal people. Art is so emotional and art is so, it's a way to get lost from the world, or from things around you that are not so positive all the time. And certainly COVID is not. Do you think your photographs have the ability to heal?
On the surface, I would tell you like I'm not sure until I heard a story of someone who bought a piece, and this happened prior to COVID. But I sold a few pieces of. She's the greatest. She's a sound engineer in Austin, and she happens the work really speaks to her. She told me that once the work was up in her kitchen or the room next to the kitchen, she was going through a divorce. And by looking at a beautiful shot of a bus bumper and a trash can that she loved, she was reminded that there's always something to be grateful for. There's always that thin line, that silver lining. So those are the stories that make you feel really fulfilled. Like that's terrific.
Yeah, as a photographer, that's what you want to hear. So, how do you have time for all of this? You don't have kids, I know.
Yeah, no, but the truth is, everyone has different opinions about what it's like to work remotely. Some people struggle with that. Some people need the environment of the office. I don't. I am much more productive in this way of doing work. So my days are probably longer than they ever were. When I thought they were long in the full time advertising big agency scene, I thought that was a long day. My days are 12, 14-hour days of work a lot of times, but it doesn't feel I'm blessed to do the things I love to do. So I'm just always working. It's not work. I mean, it's a cliche. It's not work when you love it. It's tiring sometimes. I mean, I'm a little tired, but I'm very productive right now.
So, what does a day in the life of Howie Ronay look like? A day where you're shooting and you're working in advertising?
Yeah, it varies, which is exciting and cool. I always tell my wife I'm putting fires out all the time, but the day in the life right now is I wake up and I'm working with a New York agency. So you can imagine the hours. The 9 a.m. meeting there is the 6 a.m. meeting here. So I'm on the call and I'm getting briefed and I'm hearing revisions or what the client thought, and we're working through that. It's called Terry and Sandy, and they're bosses of mine for a long time. So there's a great shorthand there, and that's very fortunate. So I work with a writer. He's in New Jersey. I'm in LA. We find the time to Zoom and chat about the work and ideate, and that takes up a good amount of the day right now. That's a big part of the day, and then I hit my that's my process with me. I get on my bike. I got my camera in my pocket, and that happens in the afternoon. And if there's a beautiful old dumpster, trash can, or bus bumper, or traffic cone, or cracked sidewalk that speaks to me, then that happens that day. There's no preset like I'm shooting today. It's just always available. The Fuqua Films things that flares up with no advance warning. That keeps me on my toes.
Your work has evolved a lot. And can you tell me how?
I think most creative people would tell you, I don't want you to see my earlier works. I think you would hear that from a good amount of artists, maybe not, but it didn't occur to me until my wife and I were going through storage, which I think everyone should do every once in a while. You got to purge some stuff. We came across some early framed pieces of my photography that I really couldn't look at. The evolution has been this. It used to be if I came across a crack in the sidewalk, a rusted truck hood, whatever, the photo would merely look like that. It wasn't close enough. It wasn't abstract enough. It was just like, I'm appreciating this thing for the story it's telling me because it's lived a long life. It's got dents, it's got a story to tell. The work now, I think people always refer to my work as paintings. I find that kind of crazy. They're always like, I love your paintings. Like, how long does your painting take? I'm like, I haven't lifted a paintbrush in 30 years. So I think that's part of the process. We printed on very rich watercolor paper, and the ink really grabs, and it gives this illusion of a painting. That's why it appears to be what it is
today.
Yeah, that's part of not just the printing, but the getting in close and the graphic look. It's very much evolved. Now it looks like an abstract piece of art where it looked like, oh, that's a sidewalk.
Can you name one object that you've taken a photo of recently that's really spoken to you, and why?
There was a weird apparatus construction thing going on down the street, a few months back. Couldn't tell you what it was, a big metal thing that was beat up and scratched. And I actually had to run with my bike across the lane of highway, 2 lanes of traffic.
Oh, no.
Yeah, risk my life for the art. And get to this thing, and I actually was ducking down and trying to be covert because I saw a cop car coming, the whole thing.
Oh, that's funny.
And I took these shots that I think it's called transformation, because in construction things are being changed. And that was actually one piece that we had a raffle on in Austin, and a young woman who I think was very much into art. She was an art student, won it, and it meant a lot to her. So that one sticks out.
Oh, wow. So it's called Transformation. That's the series.
hmm
Very nice.
One of the ideas that is exciting me about where this could go is that if you imagine you are a big construction company, ones that build commercial real estate or homes, there's a point in that process, or hotels, boutique hotels, especially hotels. There's a point in that process where they're having the ground broken and the ugly machines are coming in and the dumpsters and the oil barrels are there. I'm starting to develop a deck and a pitch to companies that have projects underway where I can get there with a permit, get my hard hat on, shoot from their construction site, knowing that in a year or two, those pieces will be bespoke pieces tailored for that property.
That's such a great idea. And if I know of anybody who's doing construction, I'm going to think of you to.
I would love to do it for a hotel. I just think that would be wild. Like,
and then they could put the photos up in the hotel.
The guest rooms, the lobby. I mean, to say that's from our construction site, because the construction, the company has the same mission as me. There's an empty lot, nothing going on, no one's looking at it. Then a beautiful piece of art,
right,
a hotel is born.
I think we just came up with our next project.
Yeah, so my art is reinforcing what that construction company's mission is.
Same mission. Oh, so cool. Howie, it's been so great to talk to you. Thank you so much for making the time and just letting me into your world a little bit. And if anybody listening has any questions about Howie's photography, you can email me through the Art Dimensions website, which again is artdimensionsonline.com. And you can check out Howie's amazing abstract photographs on that site as well.
It was a pleasure. I really I'm humbled to be a guest on this, and I look forward to seeing more of your artists being, the more conversations that they have with you. It's a great thing you're doing.
Thank you so much. This has been just amazing, and you were an awesome first guest. And I'm not just saying that.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much, Howie, and thank you, artists and listeners, for tuning in to Art Dimensions Beyond the Palette. Make sure to subscribe on your favorite platform, follow us on Good Pods, and tell a friend about the podcast. As always, you can check out the works of artists on this show by visiting artdimensionsonline.com. Happy creating!